Okay guys, we're going to do something new in Unity today. We're going to learn about a really powerful system that we haven't touched yet. We're going to be using the particle system. So, what is a particle system, or a particle effect? Particle effects are used for all sorts of different things in games. They could be used to create fireworks or sparks. They could be used to create smoke, or the flame for a candle, torch, or campfire. They can be used to create falling snow or rain, or splashes on the surface of water. So particle effects can do a lot of different things. But today we'll be learning how to use our particle effects to make a fire. So we're starting off with a very basic image. The only thing at all special about this image is that it's a PNG, meaning it has a transparent background. So all we have really here is a little cloud of fire. So we'll be bringing this PNG into our Unity assets. I have mine saved right here on my desktop, and I will just drag it in right down here. Now you could go find your own image with a transparent background for this, but to make it easy, I also included this exact PNG in Schoology as a file that you can download. Now, we're not just dragging this image into our scene. That's not going to help much. What we are going to do is create a new game object. So over in our hierarchy, you can either click on Create or Control-click and then click Create Empty. This empty game object, just like when we started our light last time, has nothing except a transform and is just named Game Object. I'm just going to rename this Fire for now. Now, to start creating our particle effect, we need to go over to the inspector of our Fire game object, then click on Add Component. Then, we want to start looking for the particle system. You can do that by simply starting to type in PAR, and it will be your first return, particle system. When we click on this, it's already going to start doing its thing, but its thing is pretty ugly right now. So this is really just a placeholder, but it's showing us that our particles are moving, they're animated. But if I want to turn this into a fire, there's a couple things I need to do first. Right now you can see that my particle effect is sort of shooting out to the side, and fire doesn't usually just shoot to the side unless it's coming out of a flamethrower. So if I want to turn this into a campfire, the first thing I'm going to do is rotate this effect so that the particles are going from bottom to top instead of side to side. So I can grab my rotate tool and I can start doing this by hand, but as I start rotating it by hand, I notice that the rotation here is going to, let's see, right now it's at -41. So if I want this to go straight up, logic can tell me that I need this to go to -90. And now my particles are going straight upwards. So it's going the direction that fire needs to go, but otherwise these purple squares aren't very convincing. So just for a moment, I'm going to collapse this particle system here so that it's not taking up my entire inspector. Then I'm going to take the image, the PNG that we just brought in, and I'm going to drag this over into the inspector. And I'll just drop it here. And you'll see we have our fire showing up. Let me change the lighting here so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So here's my fire image. Okay, that's not very convincing either. Though it had a transparent background, now we have this sort of black background behind our flame. And that doesn't look very good at all. So we want to go over here to our fire particle shader that we just put in. And we want to change the shader type from standard. We'll go down to particles, because this is a particle effect, and simply change it to additive. And now you'll see what just looks like kind of little sparks of flame. Doesn't look much like a fire pit or a torch, but you can see we're going in the right direction. So now let's go expand our particle system and start looking at some of these settings. So right now I have these very small images just kind of flying up, but I want to kind of condense these down into a tighter package so that it looks like a burning fire coming from a single point. One of the best ways I can do this is by reducing the start lifetime and speed. Right now these are both at 5. I'm going to bring both of these down to 1 for right now, though I'll probably play around with them a little bit more later to get them just right. So our fire is contained in a smaller area, that's a start, but this is still just kind of little flecks of fire that don't really look connected, or like they're actually burning anything. So now let's go to start size, and we're going to increase this pretty drastically. Even if I put it at 10, yeah, that's starting to look a lot more convincing. It looks like we actually kind of have a ball of fire now. So you can play around with this number, but I think I'll leave it at about 20 for right now. If we want to make our fire feel a little more vibrant, we can go and we can tweak the start color. Right now we just have the original color of the image, which looks pretty good, but if you want to add some red or orange to this, you can make that fire feel like it's really burning hot. Keep in mind, you could also make this look like it's blue or purple or green, depending on what you're doing in your environment. If you're trying to make some sort of a magical fire, well then you might very well want it to be purple or green. But I'll keep striving for realism for now, And I'll just add a little hint of red to this, which is going to blend in with the colors that are already there and kind of blend to make a nice orange hot fire. I usually also like to tweak the simulation speed down just a little bit here. I'm going to take this down from 1 to 0.8. That's just going to sort of slow down how quickly my flame is burning. This will be helpful later when I make some more changes. Now, as you go down, you'll notice there are a lot of different settings in the particle system. These are just some of the basic settings up here, but as we go down, we have lists of more detailed settings, most of which aren't even enabled right now. Let's start with a couple of the ones that are, like emission. If we look at our rate over time, we'll probably want to tweak this up a little bit. When we go to shape, now here's an area where we can make some pretty big changes pretty easily. You can see the shape that we have selected right now is cone. You can play around with this and see what using a donut look or a box look would do. Some of these could actually turn out really well. Right now, I'm going to stick with cone and see what we can do with that. So for one thing, you can grab this and stretch it out to be taller. So this is a pretty drastic change to the size of our fire and how it looks. We can also change the angle, either by changing the numbers right here or by grabbing on the edges and making this wider or narrower. We can actually basically change it from a cone to a cylinder where the fire doesn't really spread out at all. Now you can play around with this shape and you can play around with the other shapes. There's really endless possibilities to how this could pan out. But let's look at some other really important settings that can help us out with making something like a fire. A really helpful one is the size over lifetime. If I check this to turn it on and then open it up, it'll look like there's not much to interact with here. But if you click on this little gray bar right here, you'll see down below we get a new interface for particle system curves. You'll see this red line going from bottom to top. And if you look closely over here, you'll notice that our particles are starting off small and then growing larger, which is really kind of the opposite of what we want right now. We want our flames to get smaller as they get further away from the base and kind of be reduced into sparks and just little flickers of flame. So we can change this by hand if needed. There's also some good presets here. Like if we want to reverse this, we can simply click on this icon in the middle. And now we have larger flames at the bottom and smaller flames up at the top. If we want this to happen in a smoother curve, we can click this option on the right. And we get a similar effect. Now you can also go and change this by hand, and you can even add new points to make more drastic changes. If I double click on a line, I get a new point on it, where I can really start to drastically change how this flame works. Now a lot of stuff to do with particle systems is trial and error, so again, play around. You can use these handles to change the way that your curve works. There's a lot that can be done here. There's really endless permutations to how you can design a particle effect. But I would definitely say that this is an improvement. Now you can also play around with a similar tool. It's not quite as impactful, but you can use color over lifetime. Color over lifetime, similarly, will bring up a new interface, but this one will pop up in your top right, and this will allow you to create a gradient. Like let's say you want your fire to start almost blue or white hot at the center. And then, over time, as the flames go up to the top, they tend to get darker, more orange and red. So I'm going to take a very dark red and use this on the far right. Now it's a pretty subtle change that can be difficult to notice, but it is there, and if you do it well, it can be helpful. Another setting worth checking out in shape is the arc. If we change this arc from 360 down to something like 90, it's really going to pack our flame tighter together. And now this looks like something that could work very well for a torch or a very tightly built campfire. Now the last setting that we're going to look at, which yes, leaves a lot of these unexplored. So if you want to know more, there are more tutorials online and you can just play around with these, but if I was going to do an in-depth tutorial on each one of these, we would be here all day, which I'm sure you don't want. So let's check out limit velocity over lifetime. One of the first things I like to do here is simply turn off multiply by size and multiply by velocity, because it makes working with this drag a lot easier. Now when I'm adjusting the drag, I could just punch a number in here, or the much better option is to create a curve. When we set it to curve, we can see down here we have a green line, and we can see the red line behind it from our size over lifetime. So now we want to create our drag, which is going to kind of slow down the flame. And depending on how we create this flame, it will slow it down more at the beginning or the end. So I'm going to add a new point here about a quarter of the way through. And I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. Then I'm going to add another new point a little further in and step this up again. And then I'm going to take the very far right and pop that up as well. And I can play around with these a little bit. and see what gets me the results that I want. But this should help me sort of slow down the flames as they travel upwards and get smaller. So I think this is looking pretty decent. Though I may still go and just slow my overall simulation speed down a little bit more, because this feels like it's burning a little crazy fast right now. So maybe 0.5 or 0.4. We'll slow this down and make it not burning quite so intensely. So let's rotate around and give our fire a look. This is a pretty convincing little fire. Now remember, you could use particle systems to create a splash of water, smoke, an explosion, a flash of sparks, tons and tons of possibilities. And the more you play around with it, the better you'll understand it, and the more options you'll have. So I encourage you to play around with particle effects when you can. Keep in mind, with my fire done, now I can take it and simply scale it. If I decide I want to use this for both a fire pit and a torch, I can make this smaller, and I could put this on top of a torch. And then, when I need to create a bonfire, I can make it larger. If I decide that I need to have a building that looks like it's been under attack and is caught on fire, I can move this particle effect to try to make it look like my house is burning. So you can definitely take this and reuse it as an asset to put fire wherever you need it. But if you were really going to go into detail, you might try to create different types of flame for different situations. But this is a great place to start. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. Right now, though this looks like a fire that's burning bright, it doesn't actually emit any light. So just like you created a light and put it inside of a lamp fixture in our last example, you can create a light and put it in the center of this, tweak the color to make sure that it feels like it's coming from an orange hot fire, and that will make the effect all the more believable. So when you create some sort of a fire that you're happy with, get it burning, take a screenshot of it, and share it with us in the comments on Schoology. Alright, good luck and have fun.